She looked like any civilian passing through the Pentagon, quiet, unassuming, forgotten. Security barely glanced at her visitor badge. Officers walked past without a second look. Just an old woman in a worn field jacket until General Hargrove saw her wrist. The Hamilton khaki field watch with its faded serial number stopped him cold. His face drained of color as papers scattered across the floor. "Everyone out," he ordered, voice suddenly hoarse. Because that watch meant something impossible. That watch belonged to a unit that officially never existed. A unit he personally declared dead in 1989. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If this story intrigues you, subscribe for more untold tales of those who serve in silence. Illo and Voss stood patiently at the Pentagon security checkpoint, her weathered hands folded in front of her. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across her face, accentuating lines earned through decades of a life few could imagine. To anyone watching, she appeared like any other civilian visitor, perhaps someone's mother or a low-level contractor seeking to navigate bureaucracy. Nothing about her demanded attention or suggested importance. The security officer behind the bulletproof glass barely looked up as he processed her credentials, his movements mechanical and bored. After a perfunctory scan, he slid a temporary visitor badge through the small opening in the partition. "Ma'am, your temporary visitor badge. Please stay with your escort at all times. Do not attempt to enter restricted areas. Photography is prohibited." His tone suggested he had recited these instructions thousands of times to thousands of equally unmemorable visitors. Alone took the badge and clipped it to her worn field jacket without comment. Her eyes, however, moved with practiced efficiency, noting the positions of cameras, the rotation schedule of the guards, the thickness of the security doors. Old habits. Lieutenant Rafferty arrived 5 minutes later, her polished appearance and brisk manner forming an immediate contrast to Eloine's understated presence. Checking her tablet, Rafferty confirmed the visitor's identity with poorly disguised annoyance at being assigned such a menial task. "Miss Voss, I'm Lieutenant Rafferty. I'll be escorting you to your appointment." Her tone carried the unmistakable edge of someone who believed they deserved more important duties. Illawan nodded once. "Thank you, Lieutenant." As they walked through the labyrinthine corridors, Rafferty made perfunctory small talk, explaining Pentagon protocols in a condescending manner, assuming Alone had never been in a military facility before. "We have 5 concentric rings in this building labeled A through E. We're currently in E ring heading toward the intersections. It can be overwhelming for civilians. Just stay close." Ilowan said almost nothing, only nodding occasionally. Her eyes, however, continued their methodical assessment of their surroundings, noting exits, security camera blind spots, and the positioning of personnel. When they passed a newly installed biometric scanner, her gaze lingered for just a moment longer than necessary. "May I ask, what brings you to the Pentagon today?" Bravity inquired, more out of protocol than genuine interest. "An old administrative matter," Illawan replied, her voice quiet, but carrying a subtle authority that Rafferty either missed or chose to ignore. They passed offices filled with uniformed personnel, several of whom gave Alleloan dismissive glances. Her civilian clothes and unassuming demeanor marked her as unimportant in this hierarchy of stars and stripes. At one point, she stopped to adjust her jacket sleeve, briefly revealing an old worn watch with a faded leather strap and scratched crystal face. A junior officer passing by noticed and snickered to his colleague. "Check out the vintage hardware," he whispered, just loud enough to be heard. "Probably her grandfather's from the Great War." If Eloan registered the comment, she gave no indication. She simply continued following Rafferty through the corridor, her posture neither intimidated by the surroundings nor impressed by the displays of military might adorning the walls. Rafferty checked her phone, sighing. "The general is running late with the Joint Chiefs. You'll need to wait here." She gestured to a small seating area adjacent to a conference room. "Someone will fetch you when he's available." "I understand," Elon replied simply. "The restrooms are down the hall if you need them. There's water in the cooler. Do not wander." With that final instruction, Rafferty departed, already focused on her next task. Alone sat quietly in the designated area, seemingly comfortable with being invisible. But there was something in the way she positioned herself back to the wall, clear sightline to both exits that suggested military training beneath the civilian facade. She did not fidget or check her phone as most visitors did. Instead, she maintained a state of relaxed awareness, present yet detached. 30 minutes passed before the conference room doors opened, and a group of officers emerged, engaged in serious discussion. They barely registered Alone's presence as they continued their conversation in the hallway. "The Crimson Aegis Directive has been authorized," stated a tall, severe-looking officer whom Alone would later learn was Colonel Merrick. "All sleeper protocols from the old regime have been officially terminated. We begin implementation next week." "What about the legacy contingencies?" asked another officer. "Decommissioned," Merrick replied firmly. The secretary was clear. "We're streamlining operations for the modern threat landscape." Elon's expression remained neutral, but her hand instinctively touched the watch on her wrist, a gesture so subtle it would have been invisible to anyone not specifically watching for it. As the meeting dispersed, a young aide approached her. "Ms. Voss, Colonel Merrick can see you now. The general has been delayed further." Ilawan rose smoothly and followed the aide into the now empty conference room. Maps and digital displays had been cleared, leaving only a sterile space dominated by a large oval table. Colonel Merrick remained at the head, reviewing documents on his tablet. "Miss Voss," he acknowledged without looking up. "I understand you've requested time with General Hargrove. He has been called to an urgent matter with the secretary. I've been authorized to address your concerns in his absence." "I appreciate your time, Colonel," Allen replied, taking a seat only after Merrick gestured for her to do so. "So," Merrick continued, finally looking up with barely concealed impatience. "What veteran affairs matter are you here about? If it's regarding benefits or pension, there are proper channels through the VA that would be more appropriate than a Pentagon meeting." "This isn't about a pension," Elon interrupted quietly. It was the first time she'd spoken unprompted, and something in her tone caused Merrick to pause momentarily. Alone reached into her jacket pocket, retrieving a yellow document in a plastic sleeve. "This concerns a matter from 1989, Operation Stillwater." Merrick's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "I'm not familiar with any such operation." "Few would be," Elowen acknowledged. "But General Hargrove was directly involved in its termination." Before she could explain further, the conference room door opened and General Thaddeus Hargrove entered, reviewing files handed to him by an aide. His uniform bore the weight of decades of service. Ribbons and medals telling a story of distinguished career spanning multiple conflicts. "Cannell, is this our 1430? Hargrove asked without looking up from his documents. "Yes, sir. Ms. Voss claims to have urgent business regarding an Operation Stillwater from 1989. Says you were personally involved." Hargrove finally looked up, his practiced diplomatic smile already forming. "Ma'am, how can I?" His words stopped abruptly. His eyes had fallen on Alowen's wrist where her sleeve had pulled back to reveal the Hamilton Cocky Field watch. The faded serial number on its side suddenly became the most important detail in the room. The room's atmosphere shifted instantly. Hargrove's face drained of color. The file in his hand slipped, papers scattering across the floor. No one moved to pick them up. "Everyone out," Hargrove ordered, his voice suddenly hoarse. "Now." Colonel Merrick hesitated, confused by his superior's reaction. "Sir, I said everyone out." Harrow's voice cracked like a whip, carrying an authority that brooked no argument. The aides and junior officers immediately complied, filing out with curious backward glances. Merrick was the last to leave, his expression a mixture of confusion and concern as he closed the door behind him. Alone in the conference room, Aleoan and Hargrove regarded each other in a moment of weighted silence. Decades of unspoken history hung between them. "That serial number," Hargrove finally whispered, his eyes never leaving the watch. "Khaki 7, unit designation DW-113. He swallowed hard. "You can't be." Elon met his gaze steadily. "But I am." Harrow's hand reached for the back of a chair to steady himself. "My office now." They walked in silence to Harrow's private office, a space decorated with photographs of the general alongside presidents and foreign dignitaries. Awards and commendations lined the walls, telling the story of a distinguished military career. None of them, however, referenced anything related to what had caused his reaction to Alawan's watch. The door closed with a heavy click. Hargrove moved to a panel near his desk and pressed a sequence of buttons, disabling the security cameras in the corner. He then sat heavily behind his desk, visibly shaken. You're dead, he said bluntly. All of you. I signed the papers myself in '89. The entire khaki protocol was terminated after the wall fell. Ilawan's calm demeanor remained unchanged. Did you ever wonder why you never recovered bodies? There was an explosion. Intelligence confirmed total loss of the safe house and all personnel. The Soviets had discovered your cell. Intelligence was wrong, Elenin interrupted. We weren't extracted because someone wanted us to remain in place. The Cold War didn't end for everyone. General Harov's professional composure crumbled further. 36 years. You've been operational for 36 years. Without contact, without support, Alone finally removed her worn field jacket. Beneath it, her arms bore faded scars that spoke of battles fought far from home. She rolled up her sleeve, fully revealing the Hamilton watch. Do you know what it means when a khaki operator returns wearing their timepiece? General Hargrove's face showed dawning horror. It means the mission parameters have been met. It means activation. 3 days ago, I intercepted intelligence indicating that the Crimson Aegis directive you just authorized has triggered exactly what the khaki protocol was designed to prevent. Elon placed a small, outdated data storage device on the desk. The contingency has arrived, General. They never stopped building. They just went deeper underground. A sudden commotion outside the office drew their attention. Colonel Merrick burst in without knocking, flanked by security personnel, his face set in grim determination. General, I've confirmed this woman's credentials. They're forgeries. She has no military record in any database. I've ordered a full security. Hargrove rose slowly from his chair, cutting Merrick off with a raised hand. His face had transformed from shock to something like reverence. Cannell, he said with quiet authority. You were in the presence of Lieutenant Commander Aloan Voss, Presidential Unit Citation, Distinguished Service Cross. Merrick scoffed. Sir, there's no record. There wouldn't be, Hargrove interrupted. Then, to everyone's shock, he stood at attention and delivered a formal military salute to Aloan. Lieutenant Commander Voss served in a unit that officially never existed under orders that were never written in places we never acknowledged. The security personnel exchanged confused glances. Hargrove continued, his voice gaining strength. And if she's here now, wearing that watch, God help us all. Hargrove turned to Merrick, his voice dropping to a controlled whisper. Colonel, clear my calendar. Then contact the Joint Chiefs. Authorization code Broken Arrow. Tell them a khaki has come home. Merrick's expression shifted from confusion to alarm at the mention of the emergency authorization code. He hesitated only a moment before nodding sharply and leaving the room, taking the security personnel with him. When the door closed, Hargrove returned his attention to Aloan. The initial shock had been replaced by a mixture of disbelief and growing dread. You understand what you're claiming? He said, not quite a question. The implications. I've had 36 years to consider the implications, General. Elon replied, her voice steady. I wouldn't be here if there were any other option. Hargrove moved to a small cabinet in the corner of his office and withdrew a bottle of bourbon and 2 glasses. His hands trembled slightly as he poured, setting one glass in front of Aloan before taking his own. The khaki protocol was designed as a fail-safe, he said, voice low. A final line of defense if nuclear escalation became inevitable. 12 operators embedded in key Soviet locations positioned to sabotage first strike. Capabilities if Moscow ever gave the order. 14 operators, Alone corrected him. 2 were never in the official briefing documents. Hargrove stared at her. My God. Aloan left her glass untouched. When the Soviet Union collapsed, most of us maintained position, waiting for official extraction. It never came. The records indicated an explosion at your safe house in Prague. All operatives lost. I attended the memorial service at Arlington. Harov's voice had grown hoarse. There's a stone with your name on it. The explosion was real, Ellen conceded. But only 3 of us were there when it happened. The rest were in the field. After that, communication ceased entirely. We were alone. So, you continued the mission for 36 years. Some of us did. A shadow passed across Eloin's face. Others made different choices. Hargrove took a long drink from his glass before setting it down. Why now? After all this time, because of Crimson Aegis, Elon leaned forward, her composure unwavering. Your new strategic directive. It involves decommissioning old monitoring stations in former Soviet territories, replacing them with automated systems. That's classified information, Harov said, though without real conviction. 3 of those stations are positioned directly above bunker systems that were never on American intelligence maps. Alone continued as if he hadn't spoken. Bunkers that have seen increased activity over the past 5 years. She reached for the data device on the desk, turning it between her fingers. We've been watching them build something, General, something that matches the specifications of the old dead hand system, but with modern components. Hargrove went very still. The Soviet automatic retaliation system. That program was disbanded. Officially, yes, but there are factions within the former military structure who never accepted the dissolution of the old order. They've been working quietly, gathering resources, building alliances. Before Hargrove could respond, his secure phone buzzed. He answered with a curt, "Hargrove," then listened silently before saying, "10 minutes. The secure briefing room." Hanging up, he fixed Eloin with an appraising look. "The Joint Chiefs are assembling. Before we join them, I need to know everything. What happened after Prague? How many of you are still operational? And why, after 36 years of silence, should we trust your intelligence now?" "Trust is a luxury I stopped expecting decades ago," Elon replied without rancor. "As for what happened after Prague, that's a story that would take more time than we have. The short version is that we adapted, survived, kept watching." She finally reached for the glass Hargrove had poured her, not drinking, but running her finger along its rim. "After the explosion, those of us who remained split up. Communication became too dangerous. We each maintained our cover identities, continued gathering intelligence independently. How many are still active? For that I know of with certainty. Possibly 3 others." Harov's eyes widened. "You've had contact?" "Minimal. Dead drops. Mostly coded messages and classified ads. Old methods, but effective. Allowance." Gaze turned distant. "Yevgeny died in 2008. Heart attack in Minsk. Katerin was compromised in 2011. We never found Westlake." Hargrove wrote down the names with a sense of reverence. "And the others still in place, still watching." Allowance stood, straightening her civilian clothes with military precision. "We should join the Joint Chiefs. The data on that device needs to be analyzed by your cryptography team immediately." As they walked through the corridors toward the secure briefing room, Hargrove's posture had changed. He no longer led alone, but walked beside her, matching her pace. The Pentagon staff they passed noticed the shift, the strange difference he showed to this unremarkable civilian woman. Colonel Merrick met them outside the briefing room, his earlier suspicion replaced by professional efficiency. "They're assembled, sir. Secretary of Defense Whitfield has joined remotely." "Thank you, Colonel." Hargrove turned to Eloin. "Are you ready for this, Commander?" The military title, and used for decades, seemed to momentarily catch her off guard. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Let's proceed." The war room was filled with the highest-ranking military officials in the country when they entered. Conversation ceased immediately as all eyes turned to the civilian woman accompanying General Hargrove. The room's massive. Screens displayed global positioning maps and various data feeds. The ambient light casting everyone in a cool blue glow. General Hargrove moved to the head of the table, but did not sit. "Ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate your prompt response to the Broken Arrow authorization. What I am about to share is classified at the highest level." He gestured to Eloin. "This is Lieutenant Commander Eloin Voss. Until approximately 2 hours ago, she was officially listed as killed in action in 1989. Murmurs spread through the room. Commander Voss was part of a black operations unit known as the Khaki Protocol, a deep cover contingent placed within Soviet territory during the Cold War. Their mission was to serve as our final fail-safe in the event of nuclear escalation. The Secretary of Defense, visible on a large screen at the end of the room, leaned forward. "You're saying this woman has been operating as a deep cover agent since the Cold War, without authorization or control?" Without abandoning her post, Hargrove corrected firmly, "And she has brought us intelligence of critical importance." He nodded to Eloin, who stepped forward. For the first time, her demeanor shifted suddenly. This was familiar terrain, the briefing of superior officers. She stood straighter, her voice taking on a crisp, authoritative quality that transformed her from unremarkable civilian to commanding officer in an instant. "In 2019, I identified unusual activity at a former Soviet military installation outside Krasnodarsk. She began without preamble. The facility had been officially decommissioned in 1992, but satellite thermal imaging showed energy signatures consistent with an active installation. She nodded to a technical officer who connected the data device she provided to the room's system. Satellite imagery appeared on the main screens, followed by complex schematics and intercepted communications. For the past 5 years, I've been tracking the development of what appears to be a modernized version of the Soviet perimeter system, colloquially known as Dead Hand, an automated nuclear response system designed to launch a counterattack even if command structures are destroyed. The room fell into stunned silence as the implications sank in. The original system was designed to detect nuclear detonations, seismic activity, radiation levels, and command channel activity. If it registered attack conditions and could not contact command authorities, it would automatically launch remaining nuclear arsenals at pre-programmed targets. Elo's voice remained steady as she continued. What they're building now incorporates modern technology, including AI decision systems and satellite links to multiple facilities. Most concerning, it appears designed to operate independently of state control, accessible to a small group of hardline former military officials. The Secretary of Defense's voice cut through the room. You expect us to reshape our entire strategic posture based on the unverified claims of a single operative who has been without official oversight for over 3 decades. Before Hargrove could intervene, Alohan addressed the Secretary directly. With respect, sir, I expect nothing. For 36 years, I maintained my cover, gathered intelligence, watched, waited. The khaki protocol was never about fighting a war. It was about preventing one. She gestured to the data still flowing across the screens. Every piece of intelligence I've provided can be verified through your own channels. The Crimson Aegis Directive will decommission monitoring stations that are our only early warning if the system becomes operational. The Secretary seemed taken back by her directness. You were abandoned. No. Yellow corrected firmly. I was deployed. General Hargrove stepped forward. The intelligence Commander Voss has provided has been preliminarily verified by our cryptography team. If she hadn't maintained her position all these years, we would be blind to this threat. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. There are others, Alohan said quietly. Other khakis still in place, still watching, still waiting. The Joint Chiefs exchanged alarmed glances. Hargrove addressed the room. Commander Voss didn't come home for recognition. She came to complete her mission. And now we have work to do. For the next 2 hours, the war room became a hive of focused activity. Intelligence analysts were called in. Secure communications established with field assets. Satellite resources redirected. Through it all, Alohan remained at the center, answering questions with precision, filling in gaps in their intelligence that had existed for decades. As the initial briefing concluded and teams dispersed to their assignments, the Secretary of Defense requested a private word with Alohan. The secure video feed switched to an encrypted channel, leaving just the 3 of them, Alohan, Hargrove, and the Secretary on screen. Commander Voss, the Secretary began, his tone notably more respectful than earlier. I owe you an apology. Your service record, what parts of it we can access, is extraordinary. No apology necessary, Mr. Secretary. Skepticism is healthy. Nevertheless, he continued, your country owes you a debt that can never be repaid. 36 years. He shook his head in disbelief. What happens now? Alohan glanced at Hargrove before answering. Now we find the others. Bring them in. Pull our intelligence. And after that, the Secretary pressed. You've given your entire life to this mission, Commander. What do you want when this is over? For the first time, Alohan seemed without a ready answer. The question of what came after had never been part of her calculations. First things first, sir, she finally replied. Let's make sure there is an after. The next morning dawned clear and cold over Washington, D.C. Alohan stood at the window of her temporary quarters at Fort McNair, watching the early light glint off the PTOAC. For the first time in decades, she had slept in a place where she didn't need to secure exits or prepare contingencies. The sensation was foreign, almost uncomfortable. A knock at the door announced Colonel Merrick, whose demeanor had transformed from suspicion to respectful efficiency. Commander Voss, the transport is ready. General Hargrove is waiting. Alohan nodded, gathering the few possessions she had brought with her. She caught her reflection in the mirror as she passed. a strange sight in the freshly issued uniform that had replaced her civilian clothes. The insignia and rank markers felt like artifacts from another life. The helicopter flight to Arlington National Cemetery took only minutes, but Alone spent them in contemplative silence, watching the Capitol recede beneath them. Beside her, General Hargrove respected her, quiet, reviewing documents without attempting conversation. As they approached the cemetery, he finally spoke. "We've located Dempsey. He was operating under deep cover in Odessa. Extraction team is en route. Should have confirmation within the hour." Marshall was always careful, Alone replied, using the operative's field designation rather than the cover name H. Hargrove had provided. "He'll verify their credentials thoroughly. We're using the old protocols. He'll know it's legitimate." Ilawan nodded, though something in her expression suggested skepticism born from decades of caution. "And the others?" Signal sent. No response yet from Khaki 3 or Khaki 9. Khaki 5 acknowledged receipt, but indicated a need for secure extraction. Currently in a sensitive position. The helicopter descended onto a small landing pad at the edge of the cemetery grounds. A military honor guard waited at a discreet distance, their presence unusual for what was supposed to be a private visit. "I didn't request a ceremony," Elon said, a note of unease in her voice. Haro's expression was solemn. "Some things are deserved whether requested or not." They walked in silence through the precisely arranged grounds, past rows of white markers stretching in perfect formation across the gentle hills. The honor guard followed at a respectful distance, their steps measured and precise. They came at last to a small section set somewhat apart from the more frequently visited areas. Here a simple stone memorial stood engraved with 12 names under the heading Operation Stillwater, 1989. Eloan stopped several paces from the memorial, her composed facade showing its first crack as she read the names carved in stone. Her own name was among them alongside colleagues long thought lost. "We hold a service here every year," Harov said quietly. "A closed ceremony. Only those with knowledge of the operation attend." Ilawan approached slowly, reaching out to trace the engraved letters with her fingertips. "Reeves didn't die in Prague. He made it to West Berlin in 91. Lived quietly until lung cancer took him in 2003. How do you know? I was there at the hospital." He never knew. It wasn't safe for either of us. Hargrove absorbed this in silence, the weight of these untold stories evident in his expression. "And Saver?" he asked, indicating another name. "Unknown. Last contact was Bucharest, 1994. They stood in silence before the memorial, the morning sun climbing higher, casting their shadows across the names of the fallen and the missing. The honor guard remained at a distance, standing at perfect attention. "I have something for you," Hargrove said eventually, reaching into his pocket to withdraw a small wooden box. He opened it to reveal a new Hamilton khaki field watch, identical to hers, but unworn. Its leather straps still stiff, its crystal face unmarked by time or struggle. "Your watch has earned its rest, Commander, as have you." Eleoan looked down at her worn timepiece, still faithfully ticking after all these years. Her fingers traced the scratched crystal, the faded dial that had been her only constant companion through decades of solitude and vigilance. "I'm not sure I remember how to stop," she admitted quietly. "You don't have to," Hargrove responded. "But now you can choose. For the first time in 36 years, what happens next is up to you." Alawan considered this for a long moment. The concept of choice foreign after so many years of single-minded mission focus. Finally, with deliberate movements, she unfastened the worn watch from her wrist, leaving a permanent tan line beneath, a physical marker of time's passage. She held the old timepiece in her palm, a small object that had carried such enormous weight. With a measured gesture, she placed it in Hargrove's outstretched hand. "It belongs in your museum now, with the others." Hargrove nodded solemnly, understanding the significance of the gesture. He closed his hand around the watch, then stood at attention and delivered a formal salute. Behind him, the honor guard did the same, their synchronized movement a whisper of fabric and polished metal. Alone returned the salute with military precision, the motion coming back to her as if no time had passed since her active service. The weight of recognition after decades of invisibility registered in her eyes. A junior officer approached, stopping at a respectful distance. "General, secure communication from Fort Me. Priority Alpha." Hargrove checked his own watch. Right on schedule. Dempsey's extraction team should be reporting in. He turned to Alone. Would you like to be present for this? Yes, she replied without hesitation. They returned to the helicopter, leaving the memorial behind. As they lifted off, Alone gazed down at the stone bearing her name, growing smaller with distance. Something in her expression suggested she was saying goodbye to more than just a marker. The flight to Fort Mee was conducted in secure silence. Both passengers lost in their own thoughts. Upon landing, they were escorted directly to a communication center deep within the facility where screens displayed encrypted feeds from multiple sources. Colonel Merrick was waiting, his posture tense. Sir, we have a situation with the Dempsey extraction. Harov's expression darkened. Explain. The team made contact as planned, but Dempsey wasn't alone. He had company. Russian FSB, 3 officers, all dead when our team arrived. Ilawan stepped forward, her earlier introspection replaced by sharp focus. Dempsey alive but wounded, being airlifted to Ramstein. He had this with him. Merrick held up a plastic evidence bag containing a familiar object. Another Hamilton khaki field watch. Its face shattered but still ticking. He said you'd understand the significance, Merrick added, addressing Eloyne directly. She took the bag, examining the watch through the clear plastic. It's not his. This belonged to Khaki 3, Lawrence Chun. What does that mean? Hargrove asked, though his expression suggested he already knew. It means they're hunting us, Ian replied grimly. All of us. The watch is a warning. They know we're active, and they're cleaning house. Hargrove immediately began issuing orders, his voice sharp with urgency. I want all remaining Khaki Protocol operatives located and extracted immediately. Maximum security protocols, and get me everything Dempsey managed to bring out. The communication center erupted into focused activity. Alone stood in the center of the storm, her expression grim but resolute. This was familiar territory, the crisis mode she had lived in for decades. We need to assume the Dead Hand facility is being accelerated, she said to Hargrove. If they're eliminating loose ends, they're preparing for activation. Agreed. I've already ordered satellite redeployment to focus on the Krasnoyarsk site. First images should be coming in now. A technician called out, satellite feed online, sir. Putting it on the main screen. The large display showed a thermal image of what appeared to be an abandoned industrial complex, except it wasn't abandoned. Heat signatures indicated significant activity beneath the surface, and vehicles moved in a carefully choreographed pattern around the perimeter. That's 3 times the activity level from yesterday's images, Eloyne noted, studying the patterns with practiced eyes. They're accelerating. Time frame, Hargrove asked. Days, not weeks. They know we're onto them. The secure door opened, admitting the Secretary of Defense, who had flown in from Washington upon receiving news of the complication. His face was grave as he joined them at the central console. I've briefed the president, he said without preamble. He's convening the National Security Council within the hour. Commander Voss, your presence is requested. Elon nodded, though something in her expression suggested discomfort at being thrust into such high-level visibility after decades in the shadows. Before we go, she said, I need to send a message to the remaining Khakis in the field. Of course, the secretary agreed. Whatever resources you need, just a classified ad in the International Herald Tribune. They'll be watching for it. The secretary raised an eyebrow, but nodded to an aide who immediately moved to facilitate the request. As preparations were made for their return to Washington, Alone stepped aside with Hargrove. There's something you should know before we brief the president. Her voice had dropped, becoming intensely private despite the bustle around them. The Dead Hand system they're building has a fatal flaw, a vulnerability we can exploit. How do you know this? Because we put it there 30 years ago. It was always the contingency plan. If extraction failed, we infiltrated their design team, introduced a back door. Hargrove stared at her, the implications sinking in. You're saying you can disable it? Not remotely. Someone has to be on site. Physical access to the master control node. A suicide mission, Hargrove stated flatly. Ilawan didn't contradict him. That was always the final protocol, General. If all else failed. Before Hargrove could respond, they were called to board the helicopter that would return them to Washington. The conversation paused, but the weight of Alone's revelation hung between them during the flight. The following 24 hours passed in a blur of secure briefings, strategic planning, and global intelligence coordination. Aloan found herself at the center of the highest levels of national security. Her decades of solitary vigilance suddenly transformed into the focus of combined military might. Through it all, she maintained her composure, providing insights that filled critical gaps in intelligence. 2 more khaki operatives were successfully extracted, each bringing pieces of the puzzle that confirmed her warnings about the Dead Hand facility. Late in the evening of the second day, as plans were being finalized for a covert operation to neutralize the threat, Aloan slipped away from the Pentagon. She found her way to Arlington National Cemetery once more, this time alone. The memorial stone bearing her name stood silent in the moonlight. She stood before it, contemplating the strange circularity of her journey. Officially dead for decades, yet now pivotal to preventing a catastrophe few had imagined possible. She was still there when General Harrove found her an hour later. He approached quietly, respecting her solitude, but needing to speak. "The President has authorized the operation," he said without preamble. "Strike team deploys in 6 hours." Aloan nodded unsurprised. "They'll fail. You don't know that." "I do. The facility was designed to withstand precisely this kind of attack. The only way in is through someone they trust, someone already inside their organization." Hardgrove's expression hardened. "If you're suggesting what I think you are, the answer is no. You've given enough, Commander." "It's not your decision to make," Ilawan replied, her voice gentle but firm. "It never was." The next morning, as dawn broke over Arlington National Cemetery, a small private ceremony took place. Present were only Harrove, the Secretary of Defense, and the few extracted khaki operatives who had made it home. They gathered around the memorial stone bearing the names of their unit. In a glass case placed with reverence before the stone sat Allen's worn Hamilton khaki field watch. A small plaque beneath it read, "To those who served without acknowledgement. To those who watched while others slept." As the ceremony concluded, Hargrove received a secure communication. His face remained impassive as he listened, but something in his eyes changed. When he disconnected, he turned to the small gathering. "Khaki 7 is operational. Mission proceeding as planned." Across the world, a woman who had once been known as Aloan Voss moved through a frozen landscape toward a nondescript industrial complex. Her papers identified her as a maintenance engineer, her credentials impeccable. On her wrist, a new Hamilton khaki field watch kept perfect time. Some watches never stop ticking, and some missions never truly end.